Hello and welcome to the Kristy Wittering's The Career Booster podcast. This podcast is for women who are unhappy in their job and who want to find their dream career or business. In this episode, I'm going to talk to Zinzi Bianca about how her burnout at work led her to changing her life around for the better. Zinzi Bianca is a career coach who helps women in male-led workplaces who feel overworked and undervalued tune into how they work best so they transform their energy-draining job into a career that feels fulfilling and inspiring. Hello, Zinzi, and welcome.
Hi, Kristy. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy you're here today. So I just wanted to ask you if you can just tell my listeners a little bit more about you and what you do.
For sure. So, as you shared, I'm a career coach who works with women in male-led workplaces. So, those women who are often the quiet achievers who give so much of themselves to their work, oftentimes are quite perfectionistic and have high standards of the work that they do. And their job takes up just too much of their time and their thoughts and their energy. So I help them to understand themselves better, what they need and what they want in the workplace, and help to shift that relationship that they have with their work so it feels good. They can start to let go of the work that isn't serving them and start to call in more of those opportunities, those workplace relationships, and start feeling good, supported, and inspired in their workplace. And in particular as well, from the male-led workplace side of things, I help women to harness their feminine qualities in the workplace. So starting to see those as a strength rather than a weakness. So when I'm talking about feminine qualities, they're things like emotional intelligence, having a strong work ethic, and eye for detail, having taking time to consider things thoroughly and holistically, and having a high care factor in their work and in other people. So transforming that, the way that they view themselves and how they work and what they're offering in the workplace, and seeing that as a strength and something to be cultivated even more and used to their advantage rather than seen as a weakness.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of women can relate to this. Also, women who listen to my podcast, especially also when you are a working mom and you're so busy and then feeling all that pressure from the workplace. So I'm really interested in diving a little bit deeper into your story. But I thought first I will just, to your listeners, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Kristy. I'm a career coach, and I help ambitious women who are currently feeling stuck in their job. They don't like their job anymore. They've maybe been in this position for a very long time, and they want to find something else, but they just don't know what. They lack confidence. They really want to get out of their comfort zone and find their dream career or business. There's just a lot of things stuck in between, like the limiting beliefs and the fears and the doubts. And because of that, they just feel stuck there, that they cannot move past them. So on the one hand, I help them find out what it is that they are good at, that gives them energy, that they're going to thrive on doing that. And on the other hand, I really help them with the confidence and the mindset stuff. Because it's one thing knowing what you want. I mean, that's amazing when you finally find out, because that's a big problem for a lot of women. But then actually taking action and getting out of your comfort zone, that's another really big thing. So that's what I do in a nutshell. Also, just quickly wanted to touch up on the talent scan that I do with my clients. I have another podcast on this, so if women are interested, they can listen to that. So I'll just do it very briefly. I think it's episode number 8 out of my head. But so basically this scan, it's like a personality test, and it makes use of unlike other personality tests, it makes use, it speaks to your subconscious through archetypal images. And therefore, it's not so subjective like most personality tests. This actually really shows what your natural talents and strengths are that you didn't even know you had. And that's just, yeah, worth gold, because once you know this, it just opens up so many new doors and opportunities for you. And also just what really gives you energy, but also what you learned, that you maybe became good at, what skills and talents, but that's actually draining your energy, that doesn't even suit you at all. So yeah, if any of your listeners are interested in that, they can listen to the episode. Yeah, like I said, I think it's number 8.
That's
so
amazing.
Yeah. So now I'm curious about you, about your story, because you said that you were in a burnout. So I would really like to know how you got into the burnout, and also what did you do to get out of it?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll try and summarize this as succinctly as I can without waffling about my whole life story. But to start it off, I started my career as a civil engineering construction. I had really high standards for myself and the work that I was doing. I wanted, particularly working in the construction space, I wanted to feel like I'd done everything I could to make sure whatever we were building was built well, so I could sleep well at night. I also felt a bit, or very much so at times, like a fish out of water, very much imposter syndrome. I had not necessarily had the real hands-on upbringing of some of the more masculine things that you might do in terms of building things at home. So when I got to site, I was learning so much right from the get-go that a lot of the guys would have just known already from what they'd been exposed to as kids. So I was also the only woman on my section of the site. So it was with at least 30 or so guys at any point in time. So I felt just naturally a lot of eyes on me and a lot of pressure on me to prove myself that I was worthy of doing the job that I was doing, that I knew my stuff, even though I was like still working it all out inside. And yeah, that made me put a lot of pressure on myself and made me also feel like quite anxious, a number of different things going on there. And the first site that I worked at, or the first really big construction site I worked at, it was a really supportive working environment. So even though I felt pretty out of my depth, I had a lot of support and a lot of guys that could see what I had to offer and would support me in various different ways and take me under their wing and show me how, like, what I needed to learn. But it was also very stretching and a lot to learn. And that was all good for that first site, even though there was a lot to take in there. But when I moved to the second site, that was when it was a completely different work environment, a different way that the project was structured and funded. And it was very much super high pressure. We've got to get things done in an incredibly tight timeline. And I was put in charge of a part of the site, or the way of we were building, that I hadn't had experience in. So I just finally built up this experience in this other section, which is more in like concrete construction, then moved into this other area of steel construction. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. And it wasn't something that you could go and rectify on site. It had to be perfect when it got there. Otherwise it would be sent back. And I was also, on that particular site, I was traveling a lot, even just to get there. So it was at least 1 to 2 hours of traveling to and from site. I was working from 7 a.m. to 6, 7 p.m. at night, and I was so tired. And I didn't even realize that just being that tired, now I know if I'm really tired, that makes me quite emotional. And my ability to be able to handle uncertainty when I was just that stretched and burnt out, that I didn't even really fully understand what I was experiencing. And I was also not eating that great by my current standards. So I was just creating more inflammation in my system. That it was just this whole kind of nasty cycle that was going on. And it got to a point where all of those things just started to trigger me as well. I didn't feel confident in what I was doing. I didn't feel confident in the collective of what we were doing and the standards of, like, compared to what I wanted to feel okay with what we were doing. It was just not there. So I was stressing, overthinking things. And it got to a point where the one morning I drove to site and I just couldn't get out of my car. I was just like, I am not doing this anymore. I just get me the hell out of here. And I phoned up my a more senior manager and I said, please get me off this site. So he ended up pulling me off the site, and I felt then a lot of relief, but also a lot of shame that I hadn't been able to stick it out. And the company ended up just deciding to put me in a different role on a different site later on. I hadn't really been consulted on what I wanted to do. I didn't even think to do that, my own reflection on that either. I just ended up somewhere else, and that the fact that these decisions had been made for me too just didn't feel good. So then I decided I was going to leave that organization and find my own thing. I didn't really understand what I needed to work well or what support I really needed. I just knew I wanted to get out of there, and I wanted to find a workplace where I could have more work-life balance and not be working 6 days a week, these crazy hours. I wanted to work 5 days a week. And I didn't realize, in just being in this really reactive zone, that I actually ended up creating the same situation for myself like 3 months down the track. So this new workplace that I'd gone to, it was supposed to be the 5 days a week and much smaller construction projects. I thought that would be much less high pressure. But literally in the space of time that I was there, they'd won this massive project. They'd decided to put me in charge of, again, something that I had no experience in. And
Sorry,
by the way,
I'm just curious. Did you tell them that you were in a burnout at your previous job, at this job?
No. I'd said that I was looking for, and I think leading with that in an interview might not be the most helpful approach in landing. I think I'm all up for being transparent, but obviously I was phrasing it in a way that was constructive. So I said I was looking, from what I remember, I was looking for something where I could have more work-life balance, where it was smaller projects, be able to learn a bit more and have a bit more time to get a better understanding of what was going on, and a bit more diversity in what we were doing too. So that particular workplace then decided that they wanted us to work 6 days a week. And, oh, by the way, we're not going to pay you for the Saturday. It's an expectation. So that for me was like the next kind of prompt of what the. So alongside this burnout and anxiousness that I'd been experiencing, I'd started to seek out support as well from a mental health practitioner. And that person that I'd been seeing, I was having conversations with her about this new workplace now that I'd moved to. And I was saying to her, maybe I should stick it out for, I'd only been there for a few months. Maybe I'll stick it out for another 3 or 6 months and at least take me to the end of the year. And she said, you can either leave now when your mental health is at like this point, or you can leave in 3 or 6 months' time when it's so much worse. And then you'll have so much more work to do to get yourself back up to that point that you were. And so that was a real like wake up call for me around, okay, all right, so if it's time to go, like what does that mean, time to go? Is it, I tried just changing companies to see if that was going to solve the problem for me, but it didn't. So then I thought, if I'm going to go, let's go all out. What would I really want to do if I could do anything? Because my first career I'd been so practical about why I ended up there. I was good at problem solving. I liked pulling things apart. I had a curious mind, and I wanted to be able to make money easily from the work that I was doing. So this time I was sort of throwing that all out the window and going, if I want to do anything, what would I do, and what inspires me? And
so what was the point that you were like, okay, I'm gonna, that the burnout was really, okay, I have to stop. I have to, do something else now. Otherwise it's going to go really bad with me.
That was that point where they started talking about the Saturdays for free. And I was already like, I could feel myself coming back to that same place of feeling really anxious and super out of my depth, like not a nice place of, I've got to learn some new things and I've got this supportive team around me to help me get there. There was so much to be done in such a short space of time, and I just was in like fight or flight mode. So that was definitely the time that I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And how I ended up getting out of that situation is getting that support that I had from that mental health practitioner. It was really helpful to have someone like along with me along the journey. Was just really so much of a help. And I realized too that I could go and do anything, and that would be really exciting. And I started exploring what I'd been into outside of work. So I was into more creative things, to painting, to crafting things. And so, I thought how amazing would that be if I could find something in that space. And once I started stepping towards that, so that initial kind of point of, I've got to get out of here, like this panic and distress. And I'd been so emotional with leaving that first organization that I was just like so empty, that just having some space to kind of recharge. And once I started moving towards what I wanted in this more creative direction, then these really interesting things started to happen. So I had decided that I was going to go and study design. And I told this workplace that, like, I'm sorry, it's not worked out for me, and I'm going to go and study design. And there was a manager there that had literally, I think I was like 27 or something, and he'd said, you're probably almost over the hill in terms of where you are in your career in your 20s. And I was so determined to prove like all these doubting people wrong. And I ended up landing a scholarship for the design diploma that I took on, and it just opened people who had been doubting then, my family who had been sort of so attached to my career as an engineer, then realized, oh, there might be something to this new direction that I wanted to explore. Alongside all of that, too, a big part of me wanted to get to the heart of the mental health side of things that I was experiencing as well. I knew that it wasn't just about changing careers, that was going to solve the issues. I'd seen that just going from one company to the other, I thought the issue was the workplace. And it wasn't just the workplace. There was so much more, and there was more that I wanted to have more control over my thoughts and my mental health. So I started exploring.
If I just want to interrupt, I think it also has to
Sure.
do with boundaries, because it sounds like to me from an outsider's perspective that you didn't, or to yourself also, because you're really in a burnout and then you went to another job. And I can imagine looking back, I'm curious actually what your burnout taught you. If it was maybe that you would have just taken a break for a while, or at the second company immediately also set boundaries like, listen, I'm going to work 5 days a week, no more than that.
Yeah. And I think part of that was just not knowing what exactly those boundaries were. Like, I wouldn't have even known what the term boundaries actually is at that point in my life. So, and then let alone to be feel confident enough to go, no, I'm not doing that. And definitely as we chat more, I'll share more about my thoughts around that. But for sure, boundaries are a very big part, but they just weren't in my field of like awareness. Now I think they're so important. But at that point in time, obviously it was part of what contributed to my burnout, but I didn't even realize. So I just knew I wanted to work on my thoughts and the way I was feeling. And I started to find some different things to help me with this. I found this book called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. When I was looking for a gift for a friend, I was like, oh, this is interesting, being able to work with the stories that I'm telling myself. And then I found another book by Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, and I started
very good
being
book.
yeah, it's amazing just being able to realize my mind, what it was saying and how it was influencing me, and whether those thoughts were helpful or not, and being able to shift those. And then eventually with time as well, I started practicing and learning more about yoga, and a fair bit later on as well about Vedic astrology. So that's how I got out of it. There was no sort of short, fast, quick and discovery that I made. It was all a gradual starting to act on what wasn't working for me. I didn't know exactly what I needed or even exactly what I wanted. I just had a general idea and then started to move and take action towards that.
Yeah, I think we end up just going on a personal development journey. Like, for example, with me, it's not I was never in a burnout, but I got very sick at a company. Didn't tell any of my colleagues, and my contract didn't get extended. And then I also started to, just like you, I was in a bookshop, and then that book from Eckhart Tolle came across my path, and I started reading it. And then, and indeed, like a lot of those things, like setting boundaries, I also didn't really know about that. But I think then through that, doing different life coaching courses, you start learning about all those things. Like, okay, and getting to know more about yourself. What are your limits? I don't want to work 6 days a week. I want to work 5. I think that's really got to do with, personal development, getting to know yourself on a deeper level, what you actually want out of your career, what's going to make you happy. And I guess at that time you just also didn't know. And this was actually my next question. Your advice for women, because so many women stay stuck in a job that's making them unhappy. Now that was my question. Why do you think they just stay there? What I'm thinking now is that maybe they just don't really know any better, and that they don't really know themselves that well, so they just think it's normal maybe to be working so hard, and they see all these men doing this all around them as well, so they feel, yeah, like maybe they shouldn't complain. Maybe they must just keep quiet and keep on going because this is what everybody seems to be doing.
Yeah, that could definitely be part of it, normalizing. And we can do that with anything. Like, what sort of standards do we have for ourselves? And are we writing it off before even exploring if it's possible? Like, if we think it's not achievable to feel amazing at work, to feel inspired and energized and supported, is that just so beyond the scope of what you think is possible? And it's pretty hard to like create that for yourself if you are normalizing this experience of just feeling drained or just unenthusiastic about the work that you're doing. And that was going to be my first thought around, also maybe when it's not so bad. Like, I found when work was, it might not be phenomenal, it might be average or pretty average, but for me, I only started acting on it when it was horrible, when it felt absolutely awful. And I feel like in some ways that's the universe going, okay, if you're not taking action at this point, I'm just going to make it so much worse for you, so that then you go and like take the hint or the very big hint and the very big shove and go and do something about it. When it's okay, we can just keep plodding along. But when it gets really not great, then we can somewhat be forced into taking action. I think another big part of it too is the fear of the unknown. And I think we can also get caught on thinking that we have to know the exact thing that we're stepping into, that exact thing that I want. It's going to be exactly what I have pictured in my mind. Whereas I realize through my career changes now that just going in the general right direction is so much more helpful. Like, you can work with that so much easier and be in more of a place of taking action than feeling like you need to have this perfect clarity in order to take action. So I think that just not knowing exactly what that is and having the thought that you need to know this perfect thing and it's completely clear in order for you to move towards it can keep you just staying where you are.
But do you advise your clients to stay within the company that they are in and actually set boundaries and start speaking to the manager that they're unhappy, those things? Or would you advise them to find something else with better working conditions already from the start?
I think it really depends where each client is at. Like, I think everyone knows for themselves where you're at in that point of, if it was similar to what I described, are you waiting until it's absolutely horrendous? Then obviously you wouldn't want to be staying in that's not helpful to you. But if you're at this point where it's like, I think this is okay, but it's not great. I'm not getting the opportunities that I want. I'm not getting recognized. I'm not advancing my career. I'd like to be doing these more exciting projects or this stuff that feels more meaningful for me, but I just don't know how to get towards that. That's the point where I think it's better to work with where you're at and understand more of how you can cultivate that for yourself right now. Because if you're not doing it in that current workplace, you may just go and end up recreating that same situation for yourself, like I did with not having much awareness. So also when you start to shift your career or take big leaps, then a lot of our fears can be triggered, and it's hard to get clarity then if you're going and taking this leap without really having spent that time understanding, like, what do I not like about my current workplace? What do I like? What works well for me? What would I love to have, but I'm not quite getting? Like, having that full awareness before you take a leap, even if that means spending a little bit of time in that space to really understand and see, wow, you might be able to really shift things for yourself where you're at right now, then why not stay and explore that and try and make that happen for yourself, than putting this massive pressure on yourself to go and find that next big thing and not really knowing what that is.
Yeah, and how would you, because it's, for some people, it's just so difficult to figure out what do they really want. Okay, we're not happy in this job. I'm feeling burnt out. I feel uninspired. I feel undervalued. Okay, but then what? I know this is not for me, but how am I going to figure out what I do want to do? What would your advice be to those women who are just really feeling stuck?
So I think to those points that I just made before, spending some time just being aware, like taking time to reflect on your day, your week, what made you feel good in your day? What felt really energy draining? What felt like you really didn't want to do? What felt like a stretch, but you kind of liked where that was going? Having that awareness from the get-go can be really helpful then. I think there's also, like, that's in a current workplace. I think there's also a lot of insight we can get by reflecting on our childhood as well. A completely different kind of way. I think there are a lot of things that we discount as we get towards an age of, like, towards the end of our schooling. We have a lot of influence, particularly I feel in the Western world, that it's got to be something that practical that you'll make money from. So there might have been some things in your childhood. Perhaps you love painting or being out in nature or spending time with animals or perhaps traveling, whatever it was, and you discounted that because you didn't think it would make you money, or perhaps your parents had particular ideas around what were the right types of careers that would be esteemed in your community, and therefore you found that. So I think going back there, and not necessarily with the lens of, oh, I need to make work out of this, but what insight can you get from reflecting on those early days and sort of just exploring your own inner child, your own creativity. I think there's a lot of gems in there that we can find.
That's also what I teach my clients is indeed looking at your past, like what interests you, but also just looking now, like what do you always want to, what documentaries do you always watch, or what magazines you always read, or which books, what you always like to talk about with your friends, or what discussion did you recently have, or that you really got upset about, or that you really, like, what do you really stand for? And those kind of things can just give you clues. Even like walking around your house and looking at things, looking at your bookshelf, can give like clues of what's really that you find really interesting. And that's the one hand. And then also, like what you said about, your surroundings has so much influence on you, and also so much influence on what you just sort of shove. Maybe you have this passion, but because your parents were always lawyers, then, and they expect you kind of to also become a lawyer. So your passion of being a yoga teacher, you sort of like shove it under the carpet and don't think about it anymore. or, you have a group of friends and they'll all work at certain companies and earn certain money. We as human beings, we want to belong to the group. We want to be accepted. We want to be liked. We want to fit in. So if we're going to do something completely different to what our friends or our families are doing, we're scared of getting falling out of the group, and that's not what we want. So therefore, a lot of dreams are sort of shoved away. But we need to remember that this has got to do with our reptilian brain, and these days we don't need to belong to the group to survive anymore. So we should start to think about, okay, but what were those passions, or what are the things that I'm maybe, shoving away? But actually, because I've always feel like in the end, we kind of all secretly really know what we want, but we just don't dare to admit it, or we don't really know where to find it or look for it, because we're so stuck in our head and not in our bodies, not in our intuition.
Sure.
Yeah. So instead of thinking about it, sometimes just go for a walk, go into nature, go meditate, go do yoga, go journal. And a lot of times in those moments, take a long shower or a bath, then all of a sudden, you get these ideas. My idea of coaching was once when I was running through a park, and I had like this whole vision of me being this coach. And it was just so random, actually. But I was like, wow. And I spoke to my husband about it. And that was the first moment when this whole ball started rolling of, this coaching path. So it's interesting, when you allow yourself to just think in a different way. And then my next question is, because maybe people have some ideas and they're like, well, maybe this is something that I would like to do. But then the mindset stuff comes into play. Then it's like, oh, but am I not too old? I'm already 40. Can I study something new? What if it fails? What are my surroundings going to think of it? What if financially it's not going to work out? I need to pay the bills. Then you already see so many blocks or so many hiccups on the road that you don't even take action, because you just think it's going to be too hard, too difficult, it's going to take too long, it's going to take too much money. What would your advice be to women who have these thoughts?
I think like being very compassionate and caring of yourself with where you're at in the journey. I think taking action, even though you have those fears. To what I shared before, I think it's also just about stepping in that general right direction. And I'm such a big one on taking small steps. What's one super tiny, like if there's a small step you can take, how can you break that down to even smaller steps so that you're taking some direction towards it? So if it's a complete career change, rather than quitting your job, going and studying full time, is there a little short course that you can do? Are there some people in your network that you can reach out to that you want to find out a little bit more? What they're doing sounds exciting. Can you just go for a coffee with them and find out more? Taking those small steps in whatever feels like that right direction, and being playful with it initially, just allowing your curiosity to go there rather than going and making a big leap. It depends where you're at. Where I was at when I was at the edge of everything, I was not even caring. I just went and took this massive leap, but I knew that it was the general right direction. I didn't even know if that was going to be the final place that I landed. And I think if you, like you were sharing before, if we can allow the mind to quieten down, then we can let our intuition and our deeper soul guide us. And that's really powerful. And if we can tune more and more into that energy rather than all the thoughts going on, then the universe will help us more. It supports us more in our journey. Another book that I love to read is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And
very good book as well.
He talks about beginner's luck and how the universe, like in going and taking those leaps can help to support us. And it's only when we start to take action can it like help us along the journey. If we're just stuck and not moving, then it's pretty hard for that to start happening. And the other side as well is, like you mentioned, there are the financial side of things. Like, what are you doing right now to help understand where you're at financially? Sometimes we can, when we don't have the concrete facts in front of us, then it can seem really scary. But can you get really practical with your spending and understand where your money's going and what sort of safety net you might need if you did want to take a leap? Just having a better understanding of where you're at financially can also make it feel like you have more of that support too, rather than just blindly taking a leap and working it out later and seeing if there's someone there to catch you if something happens and you can't financially afford it.
Yeah, it's like saying maybe, okay, you really want to do this course and it's cost this much money. Can you maybe for 1 year not go on holiday, or because we so easily will buy a plane ticket to go to another country, or buy that expensive shoes or that handbag or those things. A lot of people don't even think about spending that, but then when it comes to investing in themselves, in their personal development, in learning something new, in becoming a happier person, and really finding out what it is that's going to make them happy, or taking that leap, then all of a sudden it's too expensive. So also challenge those thoughts and see if it's really the truth.
Yeah, and I think too, a big part of it is just doing something now. It's interesting chatting with some people, and perhaps 10 years ago, they were thinking about changing or exploring something new. And then 10 years later, we're still having that same conversation. And I've gone through 2 career changes, started from like when you start out in a new career, you might be at a much more junior level. So that like being able to factor that in, but that also like, if you can challenge those belief systems that you have, like that, I'm going to be so much worse off if I take this new direction. It's really fascinating what can happen when you start really honing into what you really want and what you really get inspired by and what feels really good. I feel like there's a lot of exponential potential that we can then tap into that can also be more available to us. And that might be in a financial sense as well, with exploring a career rather than being stuck in something where you don't feel that motivated in it. You're not really inspired to go and advance that career or explore how to take it further. But if you can explore the things that you're really enthusiastic about it, there's a lot more opportunity then to go and really make that an abundant career for yourself.
I was listening to this podcast the other day, and I thought it was so interesting what she said. It was like, what is the worst thing that can happen? In anything, like, you have your fears and a failure, and that maybe it's not going to work out. And what are people going to think? All those thoughts, all those emotions. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's an emotion. So the worst thing because we always do things or we don't do things because we want to feel a certain way. There's always a feeling behind the reason why we do things. And in the end, we all want to feel good. We want to feel happy. We want to feel abundant. We want to feel loved. We want to feel appreciated, accepted. But once you learn to deal with different emotions, the same as like, starting your own business, it's not just going to go up like this, you're going to go ups and downs. But if you are able to ride the waves and able to deal with also the negative emotions and process them, then I sometimes feel like you're so powerful, because then that things can lead to a negative emotion, but if you come over it, then you're strong, and then you can carry on going. You take more action and more steps towards your dream, towards achieving that goal that you want, by accepting that you're gonna have setbacks and yeah, disappointments, maybe failure, but then you just bring yourself up again, you go again, and you just process the emotions and go again.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the failure, I don't even really know if failure is such a thing. Like, it's a perspective too. There's so much gold from any time when I've been in a zone where I felt like a failure, or that shame that I felt when I first left that first job. Like, I'm able to channel that and use that now to support my clients with what I've experienced. So you never know what you're going through, what hardship or challenges, how they're going to be serving you in the long run. I think they're all there for a reason, to help us grow and evolve. When things are okay, we don't, like I shared earlier on, I don't think we really take that action. And on the flip side, when they're not great, we're forced to take action, or we're forced to be curious about what's going on in our mind, or being able to work on our inner selves. That wouldn't come about if that situation hasn't arisen. So regardless of what's sort of in your path, knowing that the universe is there to support you, to help you grow and evolve, and you just got to keep on going, like you shared, Kristy, and it will bear its fruits down the track in a really cool way.
Yeah, I like that what you said, just to sort of have trust, and that nothing is really a failure. It's all like a learning moment.
Yeah.
And then I want to just talk a little bit about confidence, because I know you also did a masterclass on confidence and how women can be more confident in the workplace. And yeah, what's your tips or advice for women to become more confident, and maybe also set their boundaries and say what they think, and that they're unhappy with certain things, especially in the male environments. I can imagine for a lot of women it's scary to be confident. That is sometimes difficult to stand up for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. So definitely go and check out my masterclass, which is on how to feel confident speaking up in meetings, but that could be in any particular workplace setting. All of those things are relevant. So if you go to zinzibianca.com, that's ZINZI, Bianca, BIANCA.com, and you'll see the download option on my homepage. So definitely check that out. Some of the things that we explore in that masterclass in how to feel more confident. So a key part is being able to calm down the mind. So having practices to support yourself to feel calm, and not just wait until you're under pressure to find those ways to calm yourself down. So whether that's developing your own mindfulness practice, so being more aware of your thoughts and the stories going on in your mind, or whether it's starting to explore meditation or yoga or something like that, to really just help to calm your mind down, because then you can start to tap into your own power and let go of those thoughts that are really not serving you. Another key thing
Crazy,
that we
yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, I just want to say that it's just so crazy how much our mindset stands in the way of achieving what we want. If we had a stronger mindset, how much more could you achieve in life if you just thought differently, and if you just didn't listen to those negative, because we all have them in our voice. It's really the trick to just notice that they're there, but just take action anyway, despite those voices.
For sure. Absolutely. One of the other areas that we explore is really, and particularly for women in male-led workplaces, is owning your uniqueness. So what I spoke to at the start about recognizing and celebrating those feminine qualities of being more emotionally aware. Perhaps you're sitting in a meeting and your client adjusts their pose or feels more bristly all of a sudden, like they're not resonating with what's being shared. You're picking up on that. There might be a whole lot of other people in the room that aren't. And if you start to be aware and celebrate the differences of how you operate and what you bring, then there's so much power in that, in feeling more confident, because workplaces, successful workplaces and organizations, big part of that is having diversity. So if you're the same as everyone else in the room, you're not bringing those different perspectives, those different thoughts, questions, ideas, then everyone's missing out because you're not sharing those. So starting to recognize those as a strength, perhaps it takes you a little bit longer when you're put on the spot with a question to think of the answer. And that's probably because you're taking in more information in the room. Perhaps you're a bit more introverted, and that has its own amazing qualities that come with being more introverted as well. So really starting to recognize those differences that you bring and celebrating those are a big part. Another last tip that I'll share as well is like we explored earlier, around letting go of what other people think. So a big part of this, I bring in the concept of aiming for this mid-band. So when we, as a human, we often want to push away negative experiences and we want to attach ourselves to positive experiences. So when we're on a holiday, we never want that holiday to end. We get really attached to it, but we start thinking all these thoughts at the end of the holiday rather than just being in the moment and celebrating the end of the holiday. So there's that same kind of feeling, and something I've been working with and with my clients around being in this mid-band. So we're not getting attached in the concept of getting attached to praise. So that I'm valuable because you're saying I'm good, or my question's valid because you're saying that's a good question. And again, with the negative side of things, then when we get someone giving us criticism about something that we're doing, we're not getting attached to either way. We're not pushing it away. We're not getting attached. We're being more in this space of, I'm valuable as I am. I am perfect as I am. I don't need someone else to validate me as a person. So we go into that a little bit deeper in the masterclass. So it's definitely worth checking out. And I found this has been really powerful because the more that you can be in that space of not being attached or pushing away anything, you can just be fully present with people and start to be a lot more confident because you're not putting your power in other people's hands. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful one.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So interesting to be able to look at yourself and see, because I think a lot of us all do that on the one hand we love getting the praise, but we hate getting the criticism. But where does it come from and why, and how can we change it? And it's so interesting when you start working on yourself and working on those beliefs that you can actually recreate yourself and become a very different person and much more confident in life when you just start looking at those thoughts.
Yeah.
And then my last question regarding, the burnout, what were your biggest takeaways, because a lot of people, they say, actually through the burnout, I learned so much. And like, what do you do now differently in the workplace that's than before? I can imagine setting boundaries, but are there maybe other things that you do differently now? That it's changed you, shaped you, and I'm just curious about your biggest takeaways from the whole experience.
For sure. Having I'm quite a reflective person naturally as well. So those things we were speaking to before around understanding what energizes me and what drains me, and also like setting those boundaries around that. Being really clear on what I want to call in more of and where I would like to see things evolving. I touched on a little bit of the astrology side of things, and I know from my astrological chart, I'm quite emotional. I'm Piscean, so I'm someone who wants to continually evolve and grow. So I know that about myself. And then I know too, to have those conversations with people at work when I feel like I've got to a point of mastering something. I'm having those conversations with my colleagues to go and take that next step. I'm asking for what I want, and I put forward why I'm the right choice for that, and being in the right kind of environment where that's celebrated, and then they're encouraging of me advancing and taking those next steps, because I know I need that to feel inspired at work. And also monitoring my energy levels, like I spoke to before, knowing where my energy is going and taking time to recharge and having really quality downtime, like really being able to switch off, to go away on retreat, practice yoga, do meditation, take that time, and knowing that that is serving me in the long run and everyone that I work with, that me taking that time is an investment in the collective long term. Because if I burn myself out by doing all of these things that I don't quite like and just overstepping my own boundaries, I'm not serving my clients or any workplace in the long term. So I think of it more as, how is this long-term relationship going to work? What can I do? I also know, and we were chatting about this before the podcast, Kristy, about that I need a few things as well. That working just in one pocket, in one type of work. So besides my coaching work that I love, my career coaching with my clients, I also work as the head of design, head of user experience design at a consultancy. So that lets me have this relevant workplace experience. So what I'm sharing isn't just hypothetical. I'm applying this stuff to my work at the moment as well. And I know that doing a few things is really healthy for my mind. It helps me detach from one thing to the other, and it keeps things really interesting and inspiring, and each of them is evolving in their own special way. So yeah, it feels really good.
I think it also has to do with, being present in the moment. And like you said, you have the different things. So when you're busy doing yoga, that you switch off and that you fully focus on the yoga and not think about your career coaching or about that client, or, I have to sort of email that client, but that you can just really switch off, be present in the moment and be with your task. That also gives a lot of peace and rest in
It
life.
does. Yeah. And it's a really good opportunity to really get clear on your boundaries and expressing those, not just taking up, I'm not going to be communicating with people after this time, and deciding that for yourself and not communicating that with anybody, being really clear. I've had that early on in my career when I started to work out, that it was quite healthy for me to do two things at the same time, but in different times during the week. I made that super clear with my clients. When I'm here, I'm 100% here with you. I'm not emailing or taking phone calls for another client. I'm 100% here with you. But on the flip side, when I'm not here, I'm 100% with my clients. So you won't hear from me. It will take a few days. So just expressing those and being really upfront, and the initial reaction isn't always like 100% welcoming of that. But when they see over time that their needs are getting met super well, and I'm bringing all this positive energy and lightness and enthusiasm and inspiration, I'm able to channel more creativity, then like everyone's happy. So sometimes it takes those awkward conversations early on, but in the long term, it serves everyone really well.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's just, you're just growing and developing and learning. And probably if I speak to you in a couple of years' time, you'll probably have grown so much more in these things and explored, gotten to know yourself more, because I think, the older we get, the more we're going to know ourselves, and also worry less about what other people think. And if they don't like your boundary, then it's more their problem than your problem. But that's something you have to grow and become more confident in.
Yeah. And seeing as you do it, like being gentle and taking those little steps as you're going, just test it out, see how it feels, see what changes. If you don't like something, what sort of boundary can you create around that? What sort of conversation can you have to call in more of what you want and send away what you don't want? It doesn't have to be huge steps, just be gentle.
Thank you, Zinzi, for this really inspiring conversation. I really enjoyed having you as a guest on my podcast.
Thank you so much, Kristy. It's been really lovely.
Yeah, and I also want to thank all the listeners for listening to the end of this podcast. And if you enjoyed listening to it, I would like to ask you to please rate the podcast so that I can get high in the ranking. And if you know anybody else who could benefit from it, then please send it through to them. And that's it for now. Have a lovely day, and till next time.